Tyner. I'm a information system manager at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. I'm here to talk to you guys about what we do to protect LA's critical infrastructure. So critical infrastructure, there's a whole list of different items, different types of critical infrastructure. You can go to CISA.gov and you can get the whole list. But for us specifically, we deal with water and power, which are two of probably the most important components to critical infrastructure. Without water, people can only live about 3 days, right? So a little bit about myself. I got my bachelor's degree just down the road at Cal State Fullerton back in 2003. And I applied to become a systems analyst with the city of Los Angeles. And it took a little while to get in, but I started in 2005, actually at one of the smaller departments, which is the library department. Got my foot in the door there. I was working as a systems analyst. And then around 2007, I moved over to LA DWP, still as a systems analyst. I started on the help desk at DWP and started working my way up through the organization. I worked on our server infrastructure group for a while, building out servers, managing storage, doing data center stuff. We built a DR site, a lot of fun things. And then about 10 years ago, there's a lot of things happening in cybersecurity 10 years ago. Target and Home Depot were getting hacked. And I had a curiosity. I had an itch that I wanted to scratch, and I wasn't sure. I wanted to learn how these organizations that were huge, multi-billion-dollar organizations, how were they getting compromised, and how was that happening? And so I started talking to one of my mentors, and he was working in cybersecurity at the time, and the cybersecurity group was very small. And so I was able to get hired into the cybersecurity group, and we started building out the cyber program. And I was a system programmer, which is a promotion from systems analyst. And I was working as a SOC analyst. And so I was not only managing the system, but I was also looking at events, looking at alerts, working with the different organizations, different business units to bring logs into our SIM. As they were talking about what the SIM is, it's collecting the logs from all those systems. From there, we actually built out our own 24/7 security operations center. So staffing it and managing it, running it 24/7. And I was the supervisor over that SOC. A couple years ago, I was then promoted and became the manager over the cybersecurity operations group. So what's that mean? Basically, I'm responsible for vulnerability scanning, vulnerability analysis. I'm still responsible for the SOC. I'm also responsible for our physical access control systems, which is the badging system, which allows people to get into different buildings and facilities. And then another responsibility for me is the vulnerability scanning, vulnerability analysis. How like we're saying, we're scanning the different vulnerabilities that are out there and trying to patch them as fast as we possibly can. That's a little bit about myself. And also in that gap, when I first graduated from college and started working for the city, I was working for the Geek Squad. So if you're looking for different career paths and what you can do, just start doing something that interests you. Look at, I was interested in technology. And so I started selling computers for Best Buy, and then it morphed into the Geek Squad. And so that was a lot of fun. And I was able to learn some of those skills that then allowed me to get that job within the city. So why is cybersecurity important? Obviously, you guys are in cyber programs and technology. You guys probably have a pretty good understanding of why cybersecurity is so important. But for us, especially on the critical infrastructure side, we have to look at things historically. There's a number of different compromises that have happened that we use as lessons learned, and we need to build off of what happened in the past. And so in order to not make those same mistakes that other organizations have made. A really important one for us is in 2016, Ukraine's power grid was actually shut down by a cyber hack. The threat actors were able to get into the utility. They moved around laterally and got to the operator's computers that then allowed them to flip the switches to turn the power off. This was a very coordinated and organized attack by a nation state. Tim had spoke earlier about the nation states. This was a nation state attack that then had a physical impact to the power grid. So we need to learn from that, learn how it happened, see what those utilities were doing so that we could then grow upon that and not make that similar mistake. 2017, Maersk Shipping. This had a global impact because they were hit with ransomware, and oddly enough, they were actually able to recover because of one Active Directory domain controller that was down for maintenance at the time. But it had a multi-million-dollar impact because when their systems went down, they didn't have the ability to control where the shipping containers were supposed to go, the boats that are going into like the port of LA, for example. So this had a massive global impact. 2018, City of Atlanta, they were hit with Samsung ransomware. It cost them over $18 million to recover. In 2019, there was 3 cities in Florida that got hit with ransomware. This also had hundreds of thousands of dollars were paid to the cyber criminals in order to try to recover their files. 2019, there was another power utility in Johannesburg, South Africa. What's interesting about this one is the way that they operate. Basically, the customers would go to the utility and they would buy credits. These credits are what would be used to then essentially power their house. And so the system that they were using to buy the credits is what got impacted with ransomware. And so the customers couldn't go in, couldn't buy those credits, and it essentially had an impact because it was in the middle of their winter. And so it was cold and it impacted people trying to heat their houses. In 2022, this was a big one. LA Unified School District was crippled by a cyber attack. You guys are probably aware of this because it was all over the news around here, but it had a really big impact on LA Unified, and they were going back to paper and pencil for a while, right? Cutting physical checks. Another one along the critical infrastructure side is Colonial Pipeline. This is an interesting use case because Colonial Pipeline, they deliver gas all throughout the East Coast of the United States. Their corporate systems, and there's a separation between corporate and OT. OT controls the flow of gas. Corporate does things like, finance or IT and things like that. So it was their corporate system that got hit with ransomware, but they didn't have a good control over where the threat actors were, and they didn't know if they were able to actually get the threat actors out in time. So they actually had to shut down and isolate both corporate and OT, which prevented the flow of gas. So that had a cascading effect where cities all across the East Coast had a shortage of gas and an impact along those lines. It also cost them, I think they ended up paying about $5 million in ransom. And an interesting fact about that one is the FBI was actually able to go back and pull some of that money back, even though it was paid in Bitcoin. Last year, MGM Grand, they were hit with ransomware, and it had a massive impact on this company. People were not able to get into their rooms when they were checked in to the hotel. The casino floors were down. It had a huge impact, and it ended up costing them hundreds of millions of dollars in damages. Interesting note, I think the average cost of a cyber attack is about $4.5 to $5 million. Along the lines of the MGM Grand attack, about the same time, Caesar's Palace was also hit. That didn't make the news because Caesar actually paid the ransom, recovered quickly. They just had to publicly disclose it. That's how we knew about it. MGM did not pay, and they had a much bigger impact. So these are the things that we're looking at from an organizational perspective. We need to learn from the past so that we can hopefully not make those same mistakes. And then if you look at all of these, one of the big common denominators is that they were all hit with ransomware. Ransomware is a multi-billion-dollar entity. It's a multi-billion-dollar organization, and there's multiple organizations all throughout the world that are trying to make money by deploying ransomware. It's actually become almost like a legitimized business for illegal activity, if that makes any sense, because the ransomware companies, they have a help desk to help out the people that are actually doing the hacking. They have customer service. So if your organization gets hit with ransomware, you can call up their customer service and say, hey, I can't make this deadline. I need help. Like, how can I get Bitcoin, or I don't have any Bitcoin. What do I need to do? So ransomware has become just a monstrosity when it comes to how big it is and how impactful it is. So ransomware, as you've heard in the past, in the past speakers, you're usually going to start out with a phishing email. The threat actors, they're going to go for the weakest link in the chain. They're going to go for the end user. It's going to start out with an unsolicited email going to one of the users, trying to get in past your email defenses, trying to get in past your firewalls. If you can get that email in there to the user, and then that user is going to be enticed to click on the attachment, click on the link that's in that email, then it's going to help them get in. And then that ransomware, the code, is going to take advantage of that flaw in that system. It's going to be step 2. Step 3 is when that ransomware then goes and encrypts the data on that system. So what's important to know also is that it's not only going to impact, if you're working for a company and you get ransomware on a system, it's not only going to impact your computer, but it's going to impact anything that your computer might be connected to, whether it's shared drives or networks or databases. It can then spread to those different connected devices, and it's going to spread very quickly. Next step 4, you're going to get a note. It's going to look something like this on your computer, and it's going to have a timetable on there. It's going to have a URL that says your computer is now encrypted. Go to this, usually a .onion site, and they're going to be demanding a ransom. Ransom is going to be paid in digital currency, usually Bitcoin, or something along those lines. This is an example of a piece of ransomware called Bad Rabbit, or the note that's left by Bad Rabbit ransomware. So something else to think about when you're working for an organization and you're helping to defend that organization, some of the ransomware will try to spread. If the threat actor gets into this computer, they're going to then try to get all the information off that computer, move laterally, and try to get to the crown jewels. The crown jewels are going to be what's most important to your company, because if they can encrypt that data, they're going to then get more money from you. They're also going to try to get to your backups too. So you can try to have backups. They're going to try to get to that. So it's important to have secondary and tertiary backups of your most critical data in your crown jewels. From a critical infrastructure standpoint, they're also going to be looking to get into the OT networks, the air-gapped firewall networks, and how to jump through that air gap, whether it's through jump servers or flaws in the firewall or misconfigurations. They're going to try to get into those OT networks, because if they can get in there, then they have more control and more ability to try to extort money from you. So back in 2011, Lockheed Martin actually came up with the cyber kill chain. And this is kind of in line with like what Daniel was talking about with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. But from a perspective of what a red team cyber analyst is going to do, or what a threat actor is going to do, is the typical steps that someone is going to try to take when they're either doing analysis, if you're a red teamer and you're trying to get as much information about a company as you can, or if you're a threat actor, what they're looking at from your company's perspective, how they're going to try to get into your company. So it always is going to start out with like the reconnaissance phase. They're going to be scanning open source intelligence. They're going to be looking at the internet, what's out there on LinkedIn, what's out there on your websites that are facing the internet, what's publicly exposed data, how much information they can get, email configurations, or are there usernames and passwords even on the dark web that they can then try to use to password spray you. After that, they're going to go into the weaponization phase. If they know what kind of cyber defenses you have, they're going to try to exploit or create malware that is going to bypass what your cyber defenses are. So from an organizational perspective, you need to be careful of even what you're putting out on the internet in terms of what you're using, because that can be used against you as well. Once the malware is weaponized, then they're going to try to deliver it. They're going to try to get it into your organization. And that's through the phishing emails, through a bad URL, a bad web link, or dropping USB drives in your parking lot. So one of the things is you're working with your users, try to train them to not trust things like emails that are potentially fishy looking, or even a USB that says CEO salary range. If there's a USB that says that, don't plug it into your computer because it's not legitimate and it's probably going to compromise your system. And that's going to create that backdoor. So once they get in, if you plug in that USB and it compromises your system, that's going to then exploit your computer, and it's going to give them the backdoor. It's going to install that malware on your computer, and then it's going to create that command and control, that beacon out to the internet. It's that backdoor for the threat actors to get in. And then once they get in, they're going to move laterally. They're going to try to move as quickly as they can and scan your Active Directory, scan your system, scan your networks. Gather as much information internally as they can, so that then they can get their essentially hands on keyboard on that last step, and then getting to the crown jewels, because that is the ultimate goal for the threat actors. Get to the crown jewels, encrypt your backups, encrypt your databases, and then demand the ransom. So from a red team perspective, it's really important to know, like, when you're working with a company, if they hire you to do a penetration test, it's really important to know these different steps so that you can work with them and say, this is what I found about your company during the reconnaissance phase, or I was able to find out what you're using for your EDR or for your antivirus, for your firewalls. And I was able to create a piece of malware that then bypassed your EDR because we knew what you were using. So understanding these steps is going to be really important as you're looking at the different types of career paths, whether it's blue team or red team. On the blue team side, it's important to know what the threat actors are doing, what stage they're in. If they're in the reconnaissance stage, it's easier to block different IP addresses they're scanning you, to stop them at the reconnaissance phase. If they're already in the installation and the command and control phase, then it's time to really start to circle the wagons and lock things down, because they might have an active breach going on. So, cybersecurity technology. Daniel had mentioned in the last presentation the defense in depth approach, and I think that is probably one of the best ways to actually help defend your company. When you're working for an organization, you want to look at defense in depth because it is the Swiss cheese model. If you have one piece of technology, it's going to have a lot of different holes in it that the threat actor can try to get through. Then you layer on the next stage, the next piece of technology on top of that, and it's going to block some more of those holes. And then the third, and then the fourth, and then the fifth. And the more pieces of cheese that you can layer on, the smaller those holes are going to get to make your organization less enticing to try to attack. Like I said earlier, the threat actors are going to go for the weakest link. If you can make your organization strong by having a strong defense in depth and a lot of technology there to help prevent those attacks, and then the resources to then manage those technologies, then the threat actor is going to say, it's too much work, it's too hard, we're going to get detected, it's not worth it, we're going to go down the road to company B, we're going to attack them because they're just running regular antivirus and we can get in through that really quickly. So for us, what we do is we do have that layered approach to the security tools. We start out, we have intrusion prevention systems, an IPS. It's looking at the different signatures from the internet in, and it's preventing stuff. It's dropping traffic, it's blocking things. If it sees bad files trying to come in, it's going to stop that. There's going to be multiple firewalls. So we have firewalls at multiple levels. We have it right at the edge of the internet. We have it then layered with another IPS and then another firewall. And then even internally, because we're running operational technology, we're running air-gapped networks. Those are air-gapped with firewalls as well. So we have firewalls that are managed and maintained all throughout the network to try to help prevent things. This allows us to do network segmentation too. If you can prevent a threat actor from getting from point A to point B, even within your own network, it's going to slow them down, make them easier to detect, and also harder to get to those crown jewels. Like they were saying earlier too, Email filtering. There are some outstanding tools that are out on the market that significantly reduce the likelihood of emails getting into your network and getting to the end user. These email filtering tools, things like Mimecast or Proofpoint, they are going to look at the emails. They're going to look at the URLs and the attachments on those URLs. They're going to run that through a sandbox. It's going to do a really in-depth analysis, and then it's going to prevent a lot of the bad emails from getting to the users. Before we had email filtering tools like that, we were seeing a significant number of emails getting into the users. We were relying on the users to help us to do the defense on that, and that's not a good strategy. Having the tool there to help prevent those emails from getting in significantly reduces your risk on that. And then there's the endpoint detection response. Once again, like Daniel was saying, the EDR tools are going to be crucial, especially as more people are working remotely. You need to have access and visibility to be able to know that the endpoint when someone's working at home, and if they take their laptop and they go to Starbucks or something like that, that it is going to prevent something bad from happening on that system. Or if something bad does happen on that system, at least you know about it, and then you can quickly identify and isolate that system. So the endpoint is also one of the most attacked vectors, but it's also one that you can help protect very well. And then there's the SIM, the Security Information and Event Management System. This is going to be the heart of the SOC. It's where all of the logs come in from the firewalls, from the IPS, from the EDR. There's application firewalls. There's all of these different layers that are going to help bring in this information. And the SIM is looking at all of this information. For us, we look at it in a number of events per second. And so the number of events per second that we're getting into our SIM is about 20,000 events per second. And the SIM is doing all of the analysis on that data. It's looking at all these events and it's doing a correlation. And so it's looking at it and it's saying, I see enough bad happening over here, whether it's a firewall deny followed by a firewall allow from the same IP address, followed by something else happening, and say, I'm going to trigger an alert, an offense. And that's where my security analysts working in the SOC then see that alert come in and say, okay, there's something weird happening on this laptop. I need to do an investigation. And they're going to start digging in. And they're going to look at that laptop and they're going to run scans on it. And then if there's enough indicators saying that there is really something bad that happened on this laptop, they will then escalate it up to our level 2 analysts, do a second set of eyes just to double check, and then isolate that system if we need to. So that's where within the SOC itself, as a blue teamer, you really want to be alert and have your eyes on the glass. You need to respond immediately, because if something bad does happen, the threat actors have automated tools. And so as soon as they can land on a computer, it's going to start kicking in some automation, and it's going to then try to move laterally, try to hide, try to disable your tools. And so from a SOC analyst position, you need to respond immediately, and you cannot be complacent. Complacency is going to be the deathbed of a cybersecurity analyst, because if you are complacent, things can happen very quickly, and that's where compromise can happen. So for us, I manage the blue team. We're the 24/7 cybersecurity operations center. We are working 24/7, 365 nights, holidays, weekends, and it's a big task. I know Tim earlier had quoted Sun Tzu, and apparently it's a common theme with cybersecurity, because there's a quote that I like from Sun Tzu as well, and it's, if you know thy enemy and know thyself, or know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So what does this mean? From a blue team perspective, if you know the threat actor, you know the tools, the tactics, and the procedures that they're going to use, then you have a way to help defend your organization. If you know yourself, which means you know your assets, you know your systems, you know your tools, and you know your users, then you also have a better way to help defend your organization as well. So in summary on that one, Sun Tzu says, know thy enemy, but it's also good to know thy enemy and know yourself. So to learn about yourself better, from a department perspective, we run a series of exercises. And we run a couple different exercises every year. So we run red team exercises. So we will hire a third party to come in and do a penetration test. And this is basically like they are assuming the responsibility of an APT or a threat actor. They're going to start out with step one, do the open source reconnaissance. They're going to see what they can find about us out on the internet. And then they're going to try to breach our defenses, try to get in. If they can't get in, we will then do an assumed breach penetration test where we'll essentially say, we're gonna pretend like you were able to get in past our defenses, whether it's clicking on a link or something like that. So you now have access inside of our network, and how can we then move? How can you then move laterally? Once they're inside the network, it's our job to then try to detect and prevent them from moving around. So it's kind of a game of cat and mouse. It's a lot of fun because it's real world training and it's real world exercises using legitimate tools, tactics, and procedures that a threat actor is going to use. Now, something else that we do, which is actually really beneficial on the cyber defense side, is a purple team exercise. This is where we're still working with the same red team, but they're sitting next to the SOC. They're sitting next to the level 1 and level 2 security analysts, and they are actively running exploits, but then they're talking to the SOC and saying, hey, we just ran a password spray against your Active Directory. Did you pick it up? If we didn't pick it up, well, now we know we have a gap in our defenses or a lack of visibility into what we're seeing. Do we need to get more logs? Do we need to get more information coming into the SIM? Things along those lines. So these are really beneficial exercises to run when you're working in a SOC or working with the SOC itself. Then on top of that, we also do tabletop exercises. The tabletop exercise is basically a paper and pen exercise. This is where you're going to just sit down with an organization. You're going to plan out an exercise. Let's say our main customer billing system just gets encrypted with ransomware. We're going to sit down with that group, with the server group, with the backup group, and we're going to work through how we're going to respond to this scenario. It's a really good way to test your documentation, which is also a very important thing. Having a strong incident response plan is very important because you want to figure out what's going to happen and how you're going to respond to things before it actually does happen. And this might even include purchasing some Bitcoin just so that you have Bitcoin in case you get hit with ransomware. So these tabletop exercises are a really good way to work through these different scenarios and work through these different, work with the different organizations, even within your own company, and get them aware of what's going on the cybersecurity side as well. So the takeaway on this one, it's really important, even if you're working on a defender standpoint in a blue team, to think like a hacker. Because if you can think like a hacker, you're going to understand how they're doing things and what they're doing, and you're going to be able to better prevent those different tools, those different tactics and procedures. If you see something really weird show up, like for example, there's a tool called Bloodhound. Bloodhound is a crazy tool that will go out and scan out like your entire network and map your Active Directory for you, and it'll tell you how to get to domain admin, the best account you can get. So if you see a tool like Bloodhound show up on your network, it's probably not a very good day for you guys, and you're going to be working some overtime. And then training. It's always good to train. Doing the red team or purple team exercises, those are forms of training. Going to training classes, getting your cybersecurity plus training, cybersecurity plus certifications, those are all great because those, from an employer perspective, if you come and you have a cybersecurity plus certification already, it shows that you have the initiative, you have an understanding. And one of the things that I really like that they were talking about earlier is setting up your own personal lab. You can actually set up your own red team operation at your own home. You can download a VM called Kali Linux, which is a hacking tool, and you can download another VM called Metasploitable, which is a vulnerable VM that you can hack. So within your own environment, you can practice running attacks against the computer, and it's very safe, very controlled, and you don't get into any ethical gray area for that. So future trends. Be remiss to talk about future trends without talking about artificial intelligence. It's definitely the biggest buzzword in the industry right now. Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence, how it's going to be used, and it's going to be used on both sides, the good guy side and the bad guy side. From an attacker perspective, what they're going to be using artificial intelligence for, or things like ChatGPT, is now they can write very well crafted, very well worded, correct punctuation, correct grammar on their phishing emails. You're no longer going to see the phishing emails that have misspelled words, weird capitalizations, weird characters that show up randomly. The phishing emails themselves are going to look much better. And it's going to be very easy for them to just go in and say, hey, I need to write an email that says all users need to reset their passwords in Office 365. It's going to write it out. It's going to craft it. It's going to look good. They add in their weaponized URL and then blast, send it away. Now, on the defensive standpoint, artificial intelligence has a lot of potential, a lot of possibilities. One of the things that is going to be really cool with artificial intelligence is it's going to allow defenders to put a vast amount of data, similar to like what a SIM does, but you can put a vast amount of data through these large language models and try to find the signal in the noise. It's going to help you analyze what's going on with your EDR and your firewalls. And you can ask it the questions of saying, where is the bad happening in this network traffic? And it's going to help us really kind of get into the low level things that are happening that we may not pick up with just one or two different tools, but we can analyze all of that data through all of the tools. And it's going to have a lot of power and potential there. Cybercrime. Cybercrime is not going to slow down. It's going to increase in complexity. It's going to increase in costs. And so it's really important to follow the trends, understand what's happening in the past, understand what's currently happening, staying on top of everything that is happening across the world. Which companies are getting compromised? How are they getting compromised, and why are they getting compromised? And learning from those mistakes so that your company can hopefully prevent that. Supply chain risk. So supply chain is a whole nother area that is a huge vulnerability. A couple of years ago, there was an attack against a company called SolarWinds. Show of hands, anyone familiar with SolarWinds? Nice. SolarWinds is a like a network monitoring company, and so it's a legitimate company. There is legitimate software development, everything like that. A threat actor was able to get in and actually implant malicious code into the source code of SolarWinds deployment. And so when SolarWinds then pushed out an update, that update contained the malicious source code, and it went into lots of different networks, including the Department of Defense and governmental networks all over the place. So it was a very sophisticated and a very, essentially, it was a zero-day attack that didn't take advantage of any flaws in the system because it was legitimate code in the system. But that code was then gathering intelligence and gathering data and doing a very slow and controlled beacon out to the internet. So it was sending this information out saying, I'm successfully installed, I have this information, and it's definitely, it's a huge risk. And as a lot of organizations are looking at it, and as you look at it from an organizational perspective as well, you need to identify where your companies that you're buying software from, where they're doing their development, what their security controls are as well. So as you're giving advice to your management, the CISO, whoever it may be, it's going to be important to really break down and understand where these companies are doing their development and try to mitigate that risk. And also looking for those small beacons out to the internet. Once again, the signal and the noise. The interconnection of devices, that's going to add a tremendous amount of complexity. From a critical infrastructure standpoint, we are looking at smart grid technology. We're looking at EV chargers all throughout Los Angeles. We're looking at a lot of different devices that are all connected. The more devices that are connected, the more attack vectors and entry points there are going to be. So for us, what we're looking at is how we can secure those connections, ensure those connections stay secure, and keep them locked down and tight within the controls. Additionally, there's going to need to be a large increase in the collaboration and the sharing of intelligence. We work with the city of Los Angeles with ITA. We send alerts down to them. They send alerts back to us. So we have a great relationship with ITA where we're communicating on a frequent basis. They give us IOCs, indicators of compromise. We search for those. If we find anything, we send it back to them, say this is what we found. If we get an alert, that alert goes down to them as well for the integrated SOC. So there's a lot of value in the sharing of intelligence. As you're working with different organizations, even if they're not within the same utility, like the same space. For us, it's good for us to talk to like Southern California Edison or PG&E and the other power utilities, but it's also good to talk to Bank of America or other big organizations because what they're seeing may not be directly related, but it might be sort of related. So if we can get those IOCs that they're seeing, if they're seeing attacks against them and they can share that with us, then it helps us better protect and vice versa as well. We need to send our attacks to them so that they know what's going on. Federal government has a big initiative and a big push for information sharing, threat intelligence. There's a number of different organizations called ISACs. There's like the election ISAC, the multi-state ISAC, energy ISAC, water ISAC. And these are all basically sharing communities where they will send us information, they will send us alerts. And so it helps us stay ahead of the different attacks that are going out on the world. So how to protect yourself. One, don't be the weak link in the chain. Don't trust unsolicited emails or the phone calls. If your CEO sends you a text at 8 o'clock at night saying, hey, I need 47 Target gift cards, it's probably not your CEO. It's going to be a scam. One of my cybersecurity instructors said this, and it kind of resonated with me a while back. He said, pretend like your mom or your priest is looking over your shoulder when you're on a computer. It's a good principle to apply because if you're at work, that computer belongs to your work. The internet traffic should be being monitored because they're trying to prevent malicious traffic. If you're at home, same principle applies. You want to pretend like your mom's looking over your shoulder. Don't do things that you shouldn't do when you're on the computer. Protect your important data. This applies at home or at work. If you can have a backup of your data and keep it offline, that's going to help keep your data secure. If your computer does get hit with ransomware, then you can at least recover that data. When you're at work, it's proper to ensure that your data is backed up, and then you keep an offline backup of that data as well. It gets expensive to do that, but it's probably less expensive than getting hit with ransomware. Then there's also other services, cloud services to store your photos, iCloud. Cloud services are great because that offers almost an offline way to save your backups. Patching. Patching is going to be crucial because it's one of the easiest ways to prevent computers from getting compromised. If it has a vulnerability, that vulnerability is going to be very easy to exploit. So if it gets patched, then it's going to be harder to compromise, and they're going to have to find different ways to get in. Updating your antivirus, making sure that your antivirus, the EDR, next gen antivirus, whatever it may be, making sure it's up to date and it's working correctly. And then, like I said earlier, having a very solid incident response plan, having the documentation on how you're going to recover if you do get hit. This is going to be crucial because it's good to think about things before it happens, because in the heat of the moment, if you do get compromised, it's going to be pretty chaotic. So you want to make sure that you have that plan well documented and rehearsed so that you know what's going on. So just wanted to share a couple different links and some resources. One of them is this site called nomoreransom.org. It's actually a pretty cool website because it allows you, they actually have some of the decryption keys for ransomware that are basically just out for the more common ransomware. It's not always going to work, but it is a possibility if the company you're working for gets hit, or if your home computer gets hit, it's a way to possibly recover. So it's an interesting website. And then I know a lot of you guys are looking to get out of college, pick up a good job. Like Tim was saying, there's definitely a shortage of cybersecurity analysts. There's a shortage of people in the cybersecurity field, and so City of LA, we're still hiring. I encourage you guys to go to governmentjobs.com/careers/LA City. Look at the classifications of things like systems analyst or system programmer, because it's going to be a way to get in, and you don't necessarily have to start out right in cybersecurity. If you can get in cybersecurity, that's great, but there's a lot of things to learn. Like for myself, I started as a systems analyst and I learned a lot because I didn't have a lot of experience working on a large network with 15,000 users or anything like that. So starting out, on the help desk, you can learn about the entire organization. You can learn about the users. You can learn about the different facilities, the different floors and people that are there, and then work your way through. It can become a long career. And I've been there for a long time now, and I really enjoy it. And there's a lot of things that you can still learn and grow, and there's a lot of potential. So thank you. I just want to say thank you again for having me out here to talk. And are there any questions? Yes.
So I was wondering
how do you secure legacy equipment and software? It's a great question. As best you can. Basically, there are some applications that are business critical that cannot be upgraded without a massive amount of effort. And from our department standpoint, what we've done with some of those mission critical applications and some of the legacy software is we've added on additional layers of protection. One of them is like on some of our older servers that may no longer be, then they no longer get patches from Microsoft. We've actually done application whitelisting. So this is essentially like another tool that's running on that system that prevents the installation of any other tools. So it goes through and whitelists what's allowed, and it prevents anything else from getting added. And so that's one of the ways that we help protect that. And so it's a twofold answer for that. One, you want to try to work with the organizations or the business units that are running those legacy applications. Be a value add where you can talk to them and say, this is what you're running now. These are the latest and greatest. What's it going to take to get there? And if they can't get there, that's when you need to add the additional layers of security controls. It could also mean isolating so that you have different systems that can only talk to, users can only talk to that system, and it can't really talk out or that network segmentation. So it's a really big challenge because a lot of times technology has moved a lot faster than businesses can move. And so from a cybersecurity professional, it's our job to recognize not only what the business can do, but also what needs to be done from the cybersecurity side. So it's really a balance. You have to look at the business as well, because if it's a mission critical application, you can't just go in and say, we gotta shut this application down because it's gonna, it's vulnerable. So yeah, it's a multifaceted approach. Any other questions? Awesome. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mike, for coming to talk today. If you have any other questions about his talk or stuff come up later, just make sure to put it in his Discord channel. We'll make sure to get it over to him. So right now it is 12:42 and we are starting lunch. So if you guys want, I think the other track is still going on. So if you want to like hear the ends of that, you can go over and listen. But we are starting lunch now. So just go out through those doors and get your lunch. And then we will start back in here at 1 p.m. for our speaker.